In the wake of recent upheavals in Syria, I was listening to a leader or a commentator probably, and they were focused that Syria needs a new social contract. Now, this is something that echoes in a number of countries where the polity is not yet stable and that go through various kind of upheavals. So you hear the echo of this in Pakistan, in a number of African countries, that the country needs a new social contract. So I thought let's discuss what a social contract is and how it keeps a society or a polity or a country from anarchy. Whenever you hammer out a deal like renting a flat, signing up for a gym, or sorting out a divorce, you are basically shaking hands on certain terms and conditions. You're signing on the dotted line, and that's a win win. It's crystal clear what you have promised to do and what will happen if you drop the ball. So, contracts like these are pretty standard stuff. Now, let's rewind to the modern era. This was the time when some brainy folks argued that society itself is stick together by a sort of grand contract. And by modern, I'm not just talking about a time frame, think mid 17th century to the tail end of the 18th. Modern is more about a vibe. It's the dawn of the Enlightenment when science started to kick off big time. Cheers, Galileo, Newton, and so many others. And people began to question the old school ways of the church. Two big names in this social contract chat are Thomas Hobbes and John Locke. They're like the rock stars of this theory, but there's a third guy often lumped in with them, which is Jean-Jacques Rousseau. Now, Rousseau is a bit of a wild card. He didn't exactly see eye to eye with Hobbes and Locke. Why, he was French. He wasn't convinced that society and government are a step up from the wild, untamed state of nature. This video is your ticket to understanding where this whole idea started and why thinking about society and government as a kind of contract really lights up the brain. Imagine a world with no rules, no laws, no one in charge, total anarchy. This is what philosophers or thinkers call the state of nature. What is life like in this wild, untamed world? Most reckon it be a nightmare with no one to enforce the rules. There's nothing stopping folks from doing whatever they please, which could lead to chaos. It's every person for themselves, simply put. Thomas Hobbes, a real brainiac from back in the day, famously called life in the state of nature solitary, poor, nasty, brutish, and short. John Locke had a different spin. He saw it as a place where everyone acts as their own judge and jury, deciding on their own disputes. You can imagine how messy that could get. Locke suggested that we ditch the whole judge and jury act to escape the mayhem of the nature. His idea, what was his idea? That we trade some freedoms for the safety and order of a society. Now, real talk, we probably never actually lived in this state of nature, but it's a handy concept for explaining why we need some ground rules, a social contract, if you will. This contract is all about living together without worrying that someone is going to harm us or swipe our stuff. It's a deal most people would happily sign up for. But like anything in life, this contract comes with a price. To get the perks of a civilized society, we've got to give up some freedoms we had in the state of nature. Hobbes says we've got to let go of the right of nature, basically, the idea that anything goes if we say it is for our own survival. Locke, on the other hand, says we need to give up playing judge and jury for our own beefs. So imagine we all agree to form a society for our mutual benefit. What's the nitty gritty of this idea, this deal? Let's say you have a brand new society on your hands. What's next? Well, you need a system for making and enforcing rules, right? Someone has got to be in charge to keep things running smoothly. Enter Thomas Hobbes. Is all put in a superpower ruler in charge, a kind of boss of bosses he calls the Leviathan. This big cheese rules with an iron fist, keeping citizens in line through fear. Hobbes lays it out pretty bluntly. Contracts are just empty words unless there's some muscle behind them. In his world, you toe the line set by the ruler, or you are in for a world of trouble, prison or worse. Then there is John Locke, who takes a more democratic stance. He's all about the majority calling the shots. In Locke's playbook, when you agree to be a part of a society, you're also agreeing to roll with what most folks decide. For Locke, the main job of the government is to protect our right, especially our right to own stuff. He's famous for saying that we have a natural right to private property. Like if you pick an apple, that apple is yours because you put in the work to pick it. But here is the rub. Having a government means giving up some control. You are agreeing to let someone else call the shots. This means saying goodbye to making your own laws, enforcing them, and dishing out punishment when they are broken. Instead, we hand over these rights to someone or a group of people who do it for us. These three big jobs, making laws, enforcing them, and punishing those who break them, are the foundation of the three branches of government you see in a lot of countries. So, living under a social contract probably beats living in a lawless free for all. But it's not all cut and dried. Here's the thing, we typically sign on the dotted line for contracts, right? But nobody ever signed up for society like that. John Locke chimes in on this, pondering what counts as tacit consent or the kind of agreement you make without saying a word. It's like, do we automatically agree to the rules of society just by enjoying the perks of living in it? Take driving on public roads, for example. These roads exist thanks to the government, so does cruising on them mean you are given a silent thumbs up to everything the government does? Locke's idea of a tacit consent gets tricky because it assumes you're cool with everything just because you're benefiting from it. But let's be real. Explicit consent, the kind where you clearly say yes, is super important. Think about how crucial consent is in personal relationships. Yet, when it comes to being part of society and reaping its benefits, no one ever really asks if we are on board. Another big issue with the whole social contract concept is who gets left out of the deal. Historically, lots of folks like women and non-European weren't even invited to the negotiating table. And you can bet there are plenty of people who wouldn't agree with a lot of what their governments are up to, both in the past and today. In wrapping up, it's clear that the idea of a social contract is more than a mere philosophical fancy. It is at the heart of how we understand society and governance. We have journeyed from the lawless nature or that state where life is a free for all to the creation of governments where we trade some freedom for security and order. As we have seen, the social contract isn't a one size fits all deal. It raises questions about the implicit versus explicit consent and highlights historical injustices and the exclusion of certain groups from this societal agreement. The social contract theory reminds us that while the framework of society offers stability and order, it's a living, breathing construct that must continually evolve to reflect the voices and rights of all its members. In the end, understanding the social contract isn't just about knowing where we have been, it's about shaping where we are going. It's about recognizing that every one of us plays a part in this ongoing dialogue. So, shaping the society we live in and the government that guides it. So, as we navigate our ever changing world, let's remember the lessons of Hobbes, Locke, and Rousseau and strive for a society that truly reflects the consent and aspirations of all its people. That's the thought I want to leave you with, my dear friends. Let's create that society, and I hope this clarifies the concept of what a social contract is, even in places where we take it for granted because it is emerged to everybody's security and benefit, and places which lack it and are still looking for it. Thank you very much, and see you next time.